Have you ever felt like someone was watching you, closer than you could imagine, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? This is the story of the Gruber family and the Hinterkaifeck murders, one of the most terrifying and unsolved cases in history. It's a tale of isolation, strange occurrences, and unimaginable horror. The Gruber family lived on a secluded farmstead called Hinterkaifeck in Bavaria, Germany. It was 1922, and the world outside their farm was still recovering from the devastation of World War I. The Grubers, like many others, lived a hard, lonely life, far removed from neighbors and townsfolk. Their isolation was their way of life, but it also made them vulnerable. The family consisted of Andreas Gruber, the stern and cold patriarch, his wife Casilia, their widowed daughter Victoria, and her two children, 7-year-old Casilia and 2-year-old Joseph. They had recently hired a new maid, Maria Baumgartner, who had just arrived to replace a previous maid who fled the farm in fear. Months before the murders, the previous maid had quit abruptly, saying the house was haunted. She claimed to hear footsteps in the attic when no one else was there and saw doors creak open on their own. The Grubers laughed at her fears, but her warnings would soon feel like an omen. It started with small things, footsteps in the snow that appeared to lead to the house but never back. Andreas Gruber, ever skeptical, searched the farm but found no intruder. Then there were the noises. Late at night, the family began hearing whispers, the sound of someone moving through the house, and the faint creak of the attic floorboards. Victoria told neighbors that she felt a presence, something watching her every move, but no one believed her. One evening, as Andreas locked up the house, he found an unfamiliar newspaper on the kitchen table. No one in the family had bought it. The family dismissed it as a mistake, but the unease grew. Shortly after, Andreas discovered that someone had tried to pick the lock on the tool shed. He found scratches on the door but no sign of who might have done it. By late March, the family's nerves were fraying. Victoria, desperate for help, confided in a neighbor, but her fears were brushed off. After all, who could reach them out there, surrounded by forests and fields? On March 31, 1922, the new maid, Maria Baumgartner, arrived at Hinterkaifeck. Her sister accompanied her to the farm, and as they said their goodbyes, Maria must have felt a pang of unease. She wouldn't live to see another day. That night, as a storm raged outside, the Gruber family carried on with their evening routine. No one knows for sure what lured them into the barn, but investigators later theorized that the killer used some kind of trick, a noise, perhaps, or a disturbance that drew them outside. One by one, the family entered the barn, and one by one, they were struck down with a mattock, a sharp farming tool. Andreas was the first to fall, his skull crushed with a single blow. Victoria came next, followed by her mother, Casilia. The youngest, little Casilia, was the last to die in the barn. The details are chilling. She wasn't killed instantly. Evidence suggests that she lay in the hay, injured and terrified, pulling out clumps of her own hair in panic before finally succumbing to her wounds. Inside the house, the killer turned to the two remaining victims, 2-year-old Joseph, sleeping in his crib, and Maria, who had just settled into her new room. Both were killed in their beds, their lives stolen before they could react. But the horror doesn't end there. What's most disturbing is what happened after the murders. The killer didn't flee the farm. For days, they stayed at Hinterkaifeck, living among the bodies. Neighbors later reported seeing smoke rising from the chimney and noticed that the farm animals had been fed. Whoever the killer was, they were in no rush to leave. Days passed, and neighbors grew concerned. The Grubers hadn't been seen, and the farm was eerily silent. On April 4th, a group of men went to check on the family. When they entered the barn, they were met with a horrifying sight. Hidden beneath layers of hay were the bodies of Andreas, Kazilia, Victoria, and little Kazilia. Inside the house, they found the bodies of Joseph and Maria. The scene was gruesome, and the sheer brutality of the murder sent shockwaves through the community. The investigation that followed only deepened the mystery. The footprints leading to the house but not away haunted investigators. Suspects were questioned, but no one was ever charged. Theories ranged from vengeful neighbors to a spurned lover, but no motive could explain the savage nature of the crime, or the days the killer spent living at the farm. In the years that followed, the Hinterkaifeck farm became a place of fear and superstition. Locals whispered that the spirits of the Gruber family lingered, trapped in the place where their lives were stolen. Some claimed to hear faint cries at night or saw shadowy figures moving through the barn. Others avoided the area altogether, unwilling to risk whatever evil had taken root there. In 1923, the farm was demolished, but even that couldn't erase the horror of what had happened. The Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of the most chilling unsolved cases in history. Was the killer someone the Grubers knew? Or was it something darker, something that fed on their isolation and fear? To this day, no one knows the truth. But if you find yourself alone on a stormy night, listening to the creaks and groans of an empty house, remember the Grubers. And pray that the footsteps you hear don't belong to someone, or something, waiting in the shadows. Do like and subscribe. Also don't forget to share with your friends. Thanks for watching.